The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are my own or those of my guests, and in no way represent the views of the company or companies that I or we work for. The stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they are told. It may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident. You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast dedicated to the journey and the challenges surrounding the life and career of Aviator Tony, his co-hosts, and his guests. Together, we will explore the many pathways to an aviation profession, the realities of what a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Aviator Tony, an airline pilot currently flying for a U.S. legacy airline with 20 years on the flight line. This is episode 71 of Squawk Ident, recorded on the 24th of February, 2021, from the Aviator Sound Studios from somewhere in Southern California. In this episode of Squawk Ident, the crew and I discuss the chaos and adventure we each have witnessed over the past few weeks. From winter is coming in Texas to rampant flight schedules in the West, and DIY Tony adventures, or dare I say, the clown show. Today we discuss the challenges with winter operations, a possible game changer with de-icing procedures for the future, the importance of pre-flight inspections, engine failures, and the longest journey from gate to the hotel van, circling approaches, and much more. All on this, the 71st episode of the Squawk Ident Podcast. Now that our pre-flight is complete, let's get ready to push off the gate, start up those virtual podcast engines, and get ready for takeoff. Squawk Ident episode 71 is officially underway. Well, joining us today is a superb aviator and co-host. He is a former international and professional racquetball champion, a member of the 9G Club, an AMP and avionics tech, an RC aircraft commander, a boat skipper, a commercial drone operator, and currently a 737 pilot for Legacy Airlines. The name we use here on the show is an alias to our employer, a U.S. mainline carrier. From his fortress of isolation, where he and his family have spent the past week snow tubing on the mean streets of Dallas. And now he's thawing out with 70-degree days from somewhere in Flower Mound, Texas. Help me in welcoming back to the show, Mr. Rob D. Rob, how the hell are you?
I'm doing much better, Tony. Thank you. It's good to be back. I know it's been a couple days since we've done our last podcast.
Yeah, a couple days, the 19 to be exact, you know.
Right.
It's been crazy on my end, too. We'll get into that in a moment. But you've been actually out there in the thick of it. And, you know, you and I have been texting back and forth with your progress and trying to figure out schedules for this recording. But I got to say, I'm impressed. What has it been like for you?
Well, I'm very happy to say and very blessed to say that our experience during the what we've dubbed the snowpocalypse here in Texas has been relatively not too bad. I mean, probably the worst case scenario that happened in our house was we lost the internet. So the kids were going bonkers, you know, and we're all streamed, you know, with our TVs and everything. So we didn't have anything. So, you know, boo-hoo us. But, you know, in all seriousness, you know, people were in really, really bad situations where, you know, there was no electricity, no heat, and, you know, pipes were freezing and bursting and flooding the houses. So there's pictures of leaks coming from ceilings, and it's a big icicle. Yeah. And that goes to tell you how cold it was inside of these people's homes because there was no electricity or heat. So the pipes burst, water would leak, and it turned into a big dripping icicle inside the house. So it's a very serious situation. And so I'm just happy to say that, you know, we really got by really well, and we've been very lucky. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and I was listening to a lot of the news about this because, you know, I was concerned, not just because, you know, it's Texas and I know a lot of people that live there, but I was concerned for you as well. I kept checking with you. Do you still have power? You know, and
you did.
But it's funny because you start hearing these things, and I was born very much in the cold tundra of the North, and migrated towards California as a child with my family. But I spent many a day, week, month, in the mountains, snowboarding and Tahoe, and staying in cabins and camping. So I kind of have this knowledge base that I was very fortunate, as you said as well, very blessed to have that knowledge base where when you're in a cold climate, there are things you can do to mitigate the damage. You can leave faucets dripping in the bathrooms because running water will not freeze like stagnant water or water in a pipe, because water, obviously, as we know, it expands, and that's how you get these bursted pipes in the walls, which are thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars to repair. Other things like food spoiling. I kept watching these news feeds coming in, and there's people going, "Oh, I lost my entire refrigerator full of food," and I'm thinking, why didn't you just put everything out on the patio or balcony or something? It's freaking 0 degrees outside. Come on, But if you don't know, unfortunately, the damage can be relatively expensive and catastrophic. And the gas range, that was my favorite. If you have a gas range in your house, in a stove, and you go to turn it on and you don't hear the click, click, click because you don't have electricity, the igniter is not working. You can use a match. You do not have a lighter somewhere. Just turn the oven on. You get some heat from the oven, Oh, I don't know.
Yeah. You and I are at an advantage in that sense. We kind of understand mechanically how things work, but there's a lot of people out there that don't have that. And, that's where it becomes dangerous for them because, what they don't know is going to hurt them.
Right.
And in watching the national media, a lot of people don't realize this area, we get cold temperatures every winter, but it doesn't last long. It doesn't last a week. It lasts maybe a day or two. We'll dip into the 20s, and then during the daytime it'll come up above 30, and that's cold for us. This particular occasion was drastic. I mean, we went. The high got up to like 8 degrees for multiple days in a row, and after all the snow and the rain, the high was like 8 degrees. So the other thing is logistically, Dallas and the area, Texas in general, in the at least in the central lower parts of the state, they don't have snow removal equipment because we don't need it. We don't get snow, like we did, and it doesn't usually hang around that long. You can't get snow shovels in the stores. They rarely sell a good winter glove. They usually sell like a cloth glove you put on your hand.
Yeah.
So there's, logistically speaking, the stores don't have equipment and stuff for occasions like this. So it got really serious, and the homes aren't built for this kind of stuff. You go up to the north and the northeast, homes are built specifically for the change in the seasons and the cold and stuff like that. And here in Texas, we'll be above 100 degrees on a regular basis for weeks at a time. So our homes are built a little differently to withstand that. So when it dips down to 8 degrees for a long time, I mean, things start freezing and things start bursting, and anyway, we're through it. And, I know there's a lot of people that are still recovering, and, hopefully they can get the help, and insurance is going to take care of them, hopefully the right way. Yeah. So
if you're a contractor and you're looking for work, just go ahead and pack up the RV and head on over to Dallas, Texas. I'm sure there'll be plenty of work for you.
If you're a plumber, you have plenty of work here in Texas for sure. Plumber, pool guys. Oh man, it's flooring. If you can do drywall, because all those homes get flooded. You have to rip the flooring, rip up the plywood, and rip up the drywall.
Well, Roger and I know a little thing about that, and speaking of Roger, also here to help us get Flight 71 of the Squawk Ident Podcast underway is another exceptional aviator and co-host. He is an award-winning trophy hosting tennis champion, a professional CFI, II, MEI flight instructor, a former freight dog, a former airline pilot, a current King Air flight instructor, a Falcon 2000 commander, a captain, and a corporate operator as well. He joins us from his oasis of chaos, where he is sharing his one day off from an enormous amount of flying this week with us. From somewhere in San Diego, California, please help me in welcoming back to the show, Captain Roger. Captain, how the heck you doing?
First of all, I'm going to need to just go with a hard pass on the drywall work. I no longer have any time in my schedule. I don't know what happened, but I've been swamped.
Oh my gosh. I mean, you were doing like what, 5 legs? Like your day off was yesterday and you told me you did 5 legs or something like that?
Yeah, on my day off, I did 5 legs. It was exciting. It's just kind of, you know, like every other operation, things happen, and so these flights need to get covered, and I'm kind of the one that's it's easiest for me to cover. I guess is the easiest way to put it.
Well, you throw a rock and you pretty much hit the airport of your base operations.
I think that's that's pretty much part of it for sure.
Yeah, and I gotta say, again, I went down to San Diego to help Roger out a little bit with some home remodeling and home improvements. Really had a good time, Roger. Thank you again for hosting me to come down. And we did some finishing work, and I was impressed. You know, we were doing some vinyl flooring, LVT flooring. We're installing that on the entire first floor of his place, and we didn't quite get done on the last time. So then when I went down there a few weeks ago, I thought, well, we'll finish up the flooring and put in the baseboard. And he goes, well, actually, I finished it myself. And I was like, really? He's like, yeah, man, you built my confidence. You taught me well. Let's do it. And I did it. And I went down there, and I got to tell you, every little corner, every little seam, I was very impressed. And I was like, wait a minute, how did you cut this? I didn't have my table saw here. He's like, well, jigsaw and the skill saw. And
jigsaw and a circular saw.
Nice.
Yeah, did great work, Roger. Great work. So yeah, we knocked it out. We finished up everything. I still left Roger with some finishing, painting, and you know. Yeah,
mostly the finishing work.
Yeah,
the finer points.
And how did you get anything done at all?
No. No, I haven't done anything except work.
Work.
Gotcha. I've seen the Caribbean. I saw Texas in the middle of that debacle. I've been to the mountains. I've been, practically strip searched by customs.
Oh,
I've gotten myself IFR current for another 6 months, shooting approaches and circling and intercepting and tracking, and it's been a bit of a whirlwind.
And that, wow. I do want to dive into your strip search by customs story. I'm sure that one's interesting because that's random. But before we do that, I got to say, I was impressed with how much your phone rings on your day off. And
there is no such thing as a day off.
I'm spoiled, and Rob is spoiled too, because our days off, unless you're on reserve and you're low on the totem pole in terms of seniority as a professional pilot at an airline or something like that, your phone might ring, but that you're on duty. You know that, hey, I'm on duty for something. And as your day off, you don't have any obligation to answer the phone whatsoever. But in your career field as a private operator, your phone rings like every hour. Did you get the fuel? Did you do the customs report? Are you going to take care of the catering? Where's the aircraft? Is the aircraft going to be out of maintenance? What about the third aircraft? Is the third aircraft compatible with the second aircraft's current flight schedule? And oh my God, you're like nonstop, 24/7, 365. And I looked at you and what did I tell you?
I could never do your job. I believe were your exact words.
I mean, how do you get stuff done? And here we are, we're swinging a hammer and we're, doing some manly work around the house and having a good time together.
Well, that was you caught me. You happened to come down because I really wanted to get some of that stuff done. But truth be told, after the fact, it was terrible timing for me. You know, you might remember that Tracy was also gone.
Right.
And so I was a full-time dad with my 2 kids in their school and doing everything for them. And I'm trying to get this work done on 2 days off in the middle of about 4 different trips, and having to deal with being in the middle of one trip, but then having to do 3 other trips that were in the middle of a big international trip. And so but I wanted to get this work done. And so you happened to come down to do this. And my mind was going in about 10 different directions, which is what you probably witnessed. Fortunately, that is not the norm. However, that it does happen, and you just got to do it. But it's been a trying past, 10 to 14 days, of which I think you came down right in the middle of it.
Yeah. Well, welcome to my world in my mind, my friend. That's me on a daily basis, trying to juggle all this. As a matter of fact, I finally put my foot down for myself and said, that's it. I'm going to take a day off. I've only flown one flight from our last show, and it was actually
get out
days.
Just get out.
Not one flight, but one sequence. And it was only days after our last show, because I had a week off in there from scheduling, and then I had a week of vacation, which I'm currently in the middle of. So in the last 20 days, I flew 2 days, and it was 19 days ago that I did that. So I told Julie, finally, okay, that's it. We're going to get all the major projects done with this house that we've been talking about doing. And this whole pandemic kind of, wrapped up into I'm not going to do it because of, right now, let's kind of keep an eye on the money and the COVID and all that stuff. Finally, we're like, let's just knock it out. So backyard re-landscape, the sprinkler system's in. I went and hooked up a trailer and bought a bunch of sod and laid down sod in the backyard. Got the garden on an automatic sprinklers, had to install those. Then Julie comes up and says, I found a trampoline for free. Let's go pick it up. So there was one day we drove down deep Southern California down in Moreno Valley, Orange County area, picked up a trampoline. So I had to take that apart, bring it home, clean it up, put it all back together. And I thought, well, I don't want to put the trampoline on this brand new grass. So I cut out a 10 by 10 section of the garden, lowered it, and laid down rock. So I had to go and have the rock delivered and with a wheelbarrow spread that out. Meanwhile, while I was kind of finishing that on that 2 or 3 day project, we had to finish the last bathroom. So as Roger is well aware of the chaos that is happening when you do that, we demoed the bathroom, had to redo a lot of electrical work. I was up in the attic a couple days, and then we decided we're going to put in a skylight. So we bought one of those sun tubes. It's like a 10-inch sun tube. So of course, before you're cutting holes in your ceiling, in your attic area, in your roof, you really got to make sure that you got everything squared away, every I is dotted and T crossed. So that took a couple days to install that, but that's done. And then, new tub and surround, which meant new plumbing. And we elected to go with the 3 valves, 1 hot, 1 cold, and a diverter in the middle, instead of the more modern single valve, because on the single valve, you can't really control water flow. So it's either on and you control the temperature, or it's off. And we like to have the idea of just having different control. So we did all that, and here I am. I put in the tub. It looked great. I start putting in the surround, and I realized because of the design of the surround, that 3 valve plumbing that I did, soldering in copper pipes and everything, wasn't going to work. Oh, no. So yesterday, last minute, I was like, okay, that's it. We got to go back to the single valve. And so I had to now cut more pipe, shut the water off to the house, and solder in this, new faucet for the shower and tub surround. I got to tell you, I'm getting pretty good at plumbing. So yeah, I've been swinging the hammer like Bob freaking Villa over here. And yeah, and I enjoy doing the work because it's a great sense of accomplishment at the end of it when I go, I did that. I remodeled that. But I'm
impressed.
I got the drywall done yesterday, but now I got to go buy more joint compound and, mud that up and got all the joints covered and texture the walls and put in the tile. Once I get that done, I can put in the vanity and the medicine cabinet and the toilet and all that. But so yeah, another 2 or 3 days worth of work and I should be done.
Dude.
And I'm trying to get at least 4 days of vacation where I'm not doing anything.
Yeah, you're crazy.
Oh, I'm sorry, man.
Yeah.
But
that's a lot of those. Well, the crazy thing to me right now, I'm just saying to you is like most guys would be, just, all right, I'm just going to tackle one of those things at a time. It sounds like you did them all
at the same time.
At the same time. I have a hard time just going to do the laundry all at once.
Well, that makes me feel better.
Yeah. Setting the bar really high, Tony.
Well,
really high for dads and fathers.
Hindsight, and it's not my first remodel. This is probably my third.
Yeah.
Actually, is my third remodel for a home. And I've got to say, I owe it all to my father. My father and I have, had this relationship where we don't always see eye to eye. and as a young child, it was tough. I wanted to go play and ride bikes and hang out with my friends. And he's like, nope, this weekend we're chopping down that eucalyptus tree and you got to help me. And I was like, okay. This weekend we're re-roofing the house and you got to help me. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, as a kid, you don't want to hear that. As a kid, you just want to be left alone and to go out and do, you'll do your chores and stuff, but you just want to be a kid. And that just wasn't happening at my house. But now here I am in my 40s and I've got to say I owe it all to him. He taught me everything I knew and about plumbing and things like that. And it has become an extremely valuable thing to know.
40 years later, here you go. You're
saving you probably
you're doing your own thing, saving money.
$100,000 on this stuff.
Well, yeah, if you add it all up, I mean, Home Depot loves me. I have my account there, and they're like, "Hey, Tony, how you doing? Welcome back." Like I was there twice yesterday. I was like, "Oh God, I hate having to go back," but because of the whole faucet thing. But anyway, that's what I've been up to in the past.
So I guess
20
Home
days.
Depot isn't very convenient for you, like it is to me, because I can just be there in like 2 minutes, and that's the bad thing about Home Depot for me is that it's really accessible. So I'm there all the time buying parts and.
Well, you're close, and Roger's close. Like you guys are both like within a mile or two of Home Depot.
Yeah,
I have 5 Home Depots, 5 within 8 miles. So I check on my phone. Roger actually taught me how to do this. I check on my Home Depot app to see if they have the product in stock before I leave the house because one may have sitting the other. So, oh my God, it's like, it's dangerous. Yeah. It's dangerous.
Yeah, that's cool.
But let's talk about aviation, shall we? Thank you guys for indulging me in hearing what I've been up to.
This is an aviation podcast, isn't it? Oh yeah. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So, we've all been very busy, and you guys have been both fortunate to be out there flying. I really do miss being out on the flight line this past couple weeks. Probably because I just needed a break from the hard labor. But you've been dealing with this weather and these schedules. Rob, let's start with you. When winter operations is always a challenge. And for most aviators, unless they are flying and getting their training done in the Northeast or the Northwest, where they're immersed in low visibility, winter weather operations, most people get their flying training, at least in the US, in places where they have close to 365 days of sunshine a year, like Arizona and Florida and Texas, where for the most part, it's good weather. So the first time they have to actually go through de-icing, the first time they have to deal with anti-icing systems is usually at one of their first airline carriers or their regional carrier where they get their first job, if that's the path that they take. And it can be a little intimidating. What did you see over this last few weeks that might help someone who is just getting into the industry and having to deal with winter ops?
Well, first thing I would say is, first of all, take it very seriously. It's icing on an airplane is no joke. It really ruins the performance of the airplane, whether it's the lift, the speed, the acceleration, whatever, weight. So we take the de-icing program very seriously here at our company at Legacy. We have the policy of clean aircraft, clean wing, clean aircraft. So if there's just a touch of frost on the wing, I mean, even if it's the size of like your hand or a finger, it has frost. It's not clean. So we have to have the aircraft de-iced. So you would think that it's a waste of money, and it probably is. You're probably throwing a lot of money over the wing with de-icing, removing the stuff, but it's part of the insurance that the airplane's going to fly the way it's supposed to have that stuff removed. As far as our experience for this past snowpocalypse here in Dallas, it was, they do a really good job at the airlines, setting up a facility or a location for de-icing to happen. In this particular case in Dallas, they take one of the pads by the runway, which is just a big open area with multiple areas for airplanes to pull in, and they turn it into a de-icing pad, and they have multiple trucks there. So you can de-ice more, I think probably 5 or 6 airplanes at once. I forget. I never really count. But it's almost like a drive-through car wash. So the airplane pulls in, you communicate with the ice truck. We like to call him, in honor of the famous Top Gun movie, we call him Iceman. So we called it the de-icing truck Iceman. And we tell them, we communicate with them, and we let them know what our configuration of our aircraft is in. And they go ahead and take care of our aircraft by removing the snow, frost, ice, whatever it may be on the airplane. And then they follow it up with a type 4 chemical for anti-ice if it's snowing, if we have active precipitation in icing conditions. They'll follow it up with, as we know, it's called a type 4 anti-ice. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. And so anyway, I think, I don't know if that's what you wanted to do with that, but that's kind of what been the experience. And we do a pretty good job here in Dallas. Believe it or not, I mean, after everything that happened here, made the news, the airport actually does a really good job with the icing conditions and de-icing procedures here, and as well as they do across the system.
Yeah. And thank you for that. That's exactly what, the general information of the process that it takes to clean an aircraft. Now, as we know, frost, especially on the control surfaces of the aircraft and the upper surface of the wing, and the vertical stabilizer, horizontal stabilizers, all those have to be clean, because any disruption to the laminar flow would generate a loss in lift. You will then not have the performance that you need to take off. Because I know there are many pilots, especially old school pilots. I've flown with a few that have been flying for 40 years. And not lately, but in my days back at Sandpiper, I've flown with a few that really had a hard time making the call to de-ice. I mean, the SOP, or the standard operating procedures, or the POH as we call it at Legacy, the Pilot Operating Handbook, is very clear. That's your aviation Bible. It basically replaces the FAR-AIM book that every flight instructor or student pilot should have in their library. And it states when and you should and should not consider de-icing. When in doubt, spray it off, clean it up. But we've had pilots that I've flown with that they're like, back in my day, we used to like de-ice with a broom, and this is nothing. It's all going to just flow. It's too cold to stick. It's just going to flow off the wing. And though they're coming from an old school mentality that is probably not far off from accurate, like you said, insurance, that the aircraft will have its performance, the insurance on the aircraft and the company as well is like, all right, we're going to allow you to insure your operation with the understanding that you're going to follow these procedures. And when you don't, that creates an issue. And at the end of the day, we've said this on the podcast many times, it's all about protecting your certificate. Now, Roger, your time at ExpressJet, have you ever had an incident where a de-icing situation became difficult?
I don't know if it necessarily became difficult unless you were at O'Hare. If you were at O'Hare, if you had to de-ice, it was difficult.
Exactly.
Hey, yeah.
It's the de-icing it's a painful process in a lot of places. Canada's great. I will say that.
Oh my God, yes.
Canada, they got their de-icing processes down. Kind of like what Rob was just talking about in terms of a car wash. You drive in, they hose you off, and it's just like a conveyor belt of airplanes because they do it all the time. It's much more of a difficult issue when it's a place that doesn't deal with it so much, and then it's kind of just a little bit of a mess, and it can take a while. The way that we deal with it now is a little bit different than the way that you guys do. The outlook that we have to take, it's just a little bit of a different mindset. But de-icing, like you said, is really important when the situation warrants it. We spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to not be in the situation so that we need to do it for a multitude of reasons at the corporate level.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, and you mentioned Chicago, which thank you very much. That's exactly what we were talking about, because Roger and I were actually based in Chicago at the same time for different companies, and unfortunately it didn't last very long. But Rob mentioned Dallas. Now, Dallas is great because they have very large, what a GA pilot would call a run-up area at the threshold of all of their runways, the pad, as they call it in Dallas. So once you transition into the pad, you are literally a couple hundred feet away from the whole short line. And so to get de-ice and then call, because you go to the de-ice frequency, you call Iceman on this particular frequency. Iceman, this is, Legacy Airlines 223, and we're requesting type 1 and 4. And there was a time when pilots or captains had the discretion to say wings and tail only or full aircraft, because again, for the factors and the reasons that we've mentioned previous, that is no longer in our company ops specs. It's actually not allowed. It's a full aircraft every time. So now it would be, type 1 and 4, wings and tail is not an option. So it would be type 1 and 4, and they know that's the whole aircraft. Type 1, just for those that may not be regular flyers, is how you melt the snow off the aircraft, the existing freezing precipitation that may be adhering to the aircraft, how you melt it off. Normally, it's like a hot, really, really hot water. You see these de-icing trucks, they've got these giant boilers, and it's like a hot water solution mixed with something else that helps.
I think glycol maybe.
A glycol mix,
like
50-50 usually. 50% water, 50% glycol mix for type 1. Now that, in some operations, will give you like 10, 15, 20 minutes of what they call holdover time, meaning the time that the de-icing process began to the time you can take off, and the aircraft can still be guaranteed to be clean, meaning nothing adhering to it, then you can go. Now, our company's kind of pushed away from that. Now they're saying, "Oh, no holdover time for type 1. Just if it's actively snowing or misting or whatever, you have to get type 4." So type 4 is the second stage in the process. So once the truck or trucks go around your aircraft, spray it all down, clean it all off, now they put usually a 100%, they use all different types of de-icing fluid, Kill Frost, ABC Plus, all these different types.
DuPont UCAR and all that.
This is like the green stuff, okay? And it's a very kind of a gelatinous, sticky, it's kind of like slime. If the Nickelodeon generation can remember slime, and it's pretty much like that, a little bit thinner. And they coat all the control surfaces with this slime, this type 4. And that has basically like an alcohol glycol formula in there that any snow that falls onto it will immediately melt and not adhere to the aircraft. So that type 4 is really anti-icing, and that's what we need to have in the event that we're in active precipitation or freezing precipitation and we have to take off. Now, once you start trucking down the runway over 100 knots, getting ready to lift off, that stuff is all just going to kind of slide from the leading edge to the wing, slide off down the flaps all the way down and leave the wing. So once you're in the air, it's gone. So the purpose of Type 4 has nothing to do with in flight. It's from the beginning of the process to the time you take off. Are you protected? And once you're in the air, then we have the aircraft's internal anti-icing system, which are heated leading edges and heated engine nacelles and cowlings and things like that. So that's the really basic general idea of what de-icing is. The complexities you can get into the finite detail, just like performance, where, all right, what's the formula? What is the visibility? Yeah. What is the freezing precipitation? Is it hail? Is it frost? Is it fog? What is it? And so all these factors now determine the differences in your holdover time, or the time you have to take off. And that's what Rob was mentioning a couple episodes ago, is we have a really cool app that we have on our EFB, our electronic flight bag. So on our tablet, we just turn on the app, put in the tail number. It knows exactly what airport you're at. You just verify all the information, and you hit a button on the app, and a timer starts, and you already told it what kind of Type 4 you're putting in there. And it'll have like a little green indicator that turns amber when you're getting close to your time, and then it turns red and an alarm goes off.
Like Tony said, the timer, the timer is predicated on the actual conditions at the airport. Is it snow? Is it freezing rain? And the temperature and the intensity. So the holdover times vary according to those parameters. And so in this app, it knows exactly, according to the latest weather report, what those conditions are. So when you hit start, like Tony said, it knows exactly the time that fluid will be active, or should we say within FAA mandated time requirements before it runs out of its holdover time, before you have to have it reapplied if you haven't taken off again. Exactly. Which is really cool, because before we used to have to reference an actual paper chart, and the captain would have to make a decision looking out the window. Well, it says here on paper that it's, only a quarter mile in heavy snow, but I could see a little further than that. So we'll call it light snow. And holdover times could be 30 minutes instead of the 15 minutes. So we can go to 30 minutes.
Right. Right. And so there was a lot of variety of decision making, obviously. Yeah. Now, Roger mentioned Chicago O'Hare. Chicago O'Hare, they have developed a de-icing pad that is nowhere near usually the active runway. So, why do they do this? Because O'Hare obviously doesn't have much real estate, taxiways and ramp areas. So they're very crowded. Most of the time we were doing our de-icing at the gate, and they would have 2 or 3 de-icing trucks per terminal or per section. And you would have to call, and you don't get de-iced until you're completely boarded up. The doors are shut. They pull the jet bridge away. All the ramp equipment is out of the way. And then the de-icing trucks would come in and spray you down at the gate. And then you'd have your holdover time. And then you would call ramp for clearance for pushback, depending on how busy the ramp is. If there's a tractor in the ramp area removing snow, active snow, because Chicago does get a lot of snowfall occasionally. And so your holdover time, that clock is just ticking and ticking and ticking. And then you have to get pushed off the gate and then contact metering, which is, you don't go straight to ground in Chicago. You go to metering, and metering tells you, they make sure you have the proper squawk code. They know where you are. And then they tell you, monitor ground control. So then you switch over and monitor ground control, and they know you're number 1, number 2, or whatever you are in the alley. And it's Chicago. So they'll talk to you. You probably won't talk to them because they just don't have time for that. And by the time you get to the runway, you could potentially be so close to your holdover time or exceed it that I got to go back to the gate and de-iced again because this took too long. And I've had that happen to me a few times. It is a nightmare. It's a nightmare. So some airports deal with it much better than others. The reason I wanted to talk a little bit about this is because I read an article just this morning that was pretty cool. And it's an article by ScienceTechDaily.com, which indicates that potentially in the future, we might change the way aircraft de-ice completely. This one was posted February 24th by Mechanical Engineering and Virginia Tech, and it's entitled Jumping Frost Crystals. Electrostatic de-icing effect could be a game changer for aircraft and HVAC industries. If you have ever gotten up on a winter morning and thrown yourself into the arduous task of scraping frost from a windshield, a Virginia Tech lab is engaging science that could make your life much easier. In research funded by the National Science Foundation, Associate Professor Jonathan Borchio has led a team in developing a potential solution for frost removal by way of electrostatics. As water freezes, positively charged protons and negatively charged electrons separate. Frozen ice crystals become electrified as the top of the frost becomes warmer than the bottom of the frost. This causes charged ions to move from the top to the bottom, or warm to cold. But it turns out that the positive ions can migrate faster. The top of the frost ends up being negatively charged, while the bottom is positively charged, a concept known as charge separation. Charge separation is in frost and has been studied in the past, but the effects have never been exploited to remove the frost from its surface. Borchio's nature-inspired fluids and interface labs set out to fill that gap. The team started by artificially creating frost on a surface. They then suspended a film of water above the frost using filter paper. Opposites attract, so negatively charged top of the frost sheet attracted to the positive ions in the water. This generated an electric field that exerted an active force on the frost sheets. Using a high-speed camera, the team observed frost particles breaking off their substrate and jumping towards the opposing film of water. Frost was grown on both metal and glass surfaces, indicating that the jump frost effect is possible regardless of the thermal and electrical properties of the object holding the water. With this data in hand, the team is moving to larger scales in their testing. The ice particles in the experiment were very small in size, each only a few millimeters or less. Borchio's team is working towards removing large sheets of ice by increasing the amount of charge that comes near the frost by replacing warm water with actively charged electrodes. The small frost jumps could become large-scale ice evacuations. This is pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. Sounds like a Tesla technology kind of thing coming to, de-icing process.
Absolutely. If this becomes a technology that is viable and not too expensive, obviously, this could be the way of the future for not just aircraft, but for HVAC systems and more. These findings were published by ACS Nano. The article's lead author was Ranit Mukherjee, a graduate student at Borchio's lab. So I'll put a link in the show notes. A really interesting article that I just happened to stumble across when I was doing some research for this show about the de-icing and all that stuff. So can you imagine? Yeah, just push that de-ice button right there on the glare shield and boom.
That would be cool. That would be cool. Yeah, that's pretty cool technology. I don't know what to say other than that would be a revolution in the way things are done for sure.
Yeah. And I look forward to kind of keeping an eye on this for the future because, pretty cool.
Just imagine like the broad scope of what that can do. The problems it could solve if if we could get that technology going.
Yeah,
quite a bit.
Yeah,
cool.
Total sci-fi here. So as we know, flight schedules are severely impacted whenever we have severe weather, not just winter operations, but summer operations, thunderstorms alike. All of it can be very detrimental to flight schedules. So what I wanted to talk about is like what the complexity of why some flights cancel and others don't. I know I've sat in the terminal many times speaking with customers, not really understanding. It's like, well, my cousin lives where we're going, and he said the weather's fine. I don't understand why we're delayed, And so you got to sit there and go, well, ma'am, the aircraft isn't here. The aircraft was probably somewhere where the weather was, or maybe. Yeah. They needed that airplane for somewhere else. I'm not going to sit here and pretend to understand and explain to you the intricate details.
I was going to say, it's suffice to say, it's a multifaceted, multidimensional, logistical challenge. Even on a good day, it's tough because you just look at our pilot group. We have 15,000 pilots. How many flight attendants? 80,000 or something like that. I don't even know, but somewhere really high, upwards higher than 40 or 50,000 flight attendants. So they all have their own individual schedules, which are predicated around Legacy Airlines route network. So then, we operate a hub and spoke system, right? So every flight ping pongs in and out of a hub, basically. And so we bring people from the smaller towns to the hubs, and then from the hubs, spread them out wherever they're going, whether it's Europe, Japan, Australia, Chicago, Miami. And then we have contracted carriers like Sandpiper who go from the smaller towns and they bring them into the hubs, and they're doing the same thing. Then you have airplanes which have their own schedules because they need to be inspected at certain times. They have to be at certain bases where they have maintenance to do those inspections. And so bring all of that together, right? You have a schedule and it's finely tuned. Now you bring in something like Mother Nature and they start, slowing things down and delaying because, like, for instance, here in Dallas this last couple of weeks, I could barely make it to my mailbox outside of my house without slipping, falling, and killing myself, let alone move around these big pieces of metal on the tarmac, or let's break it down even lower than that, getting the bags from the bag terminal, from where you drop your bags off, out to the airplane and the tugs, because the tugs don't operate very well in icy and snowy conditions. The ramps are just covered. So basically what I'm trying to say is the operation grinds naturally to almost a slow crawl or even a halt, because you can't do things as fast and as efficiently as possible. So now you can't get flights in, you can't get flights out. So now these flights start to get delayed. Now, us crew members are protected by regulations for duty days, rest, right? We can go on and all that stuff. So as we're putting all this together, we have a certain time from when we start that day till we call turning into a pumpkin, where we can't no longer work because we're federally restricted from continuing.
Right.
So as our schedules get canceled and delayed, we get pushed closer and closer and closer to that window, and we end up getting canceled. Now, this is where the bigger problem comes in, right? Because now you have crews that get stranded throughout the system, in outstations and overnights, and it could be all over the world, and they have to go and do what they call a crew rest. Well, we don't have just people sitting around in the small town of I don't know, give me a small town. Kansas City, yeah, sure. Some,
Manhattan,
Wichita, Kansas out there, Manhattan, Kansas, that works for Legacy Airlines and says, okay, I'm available, I can go fly because I live here, work. It doesn't work that way. So the company has to, and they use technology, obviously, to figure all this stuff out.
Yeah.
They use technology to figure out what is the best worst case scenario for canceling flights. What their whole mindset is try to position the crews and the airplanes and the people, the passengers, in the best situation for the recovery. So when the weather does come back, we have planes and crew members that are legal and they're ready to go to get the operation going again. Without that kind of planning, you will have situations where planes are there are planes where there's no crew members, or there's, crew members at the hubs where the planes aren't. So that doesn't do anybody any good either. So unfortunately, you get people stranded, and customers get stranded at an outstation or here in Dallas, which is unfortunate. But did I do a good job explaining some of that? But
That's great.
It's very, very, very complicated.
Yeah. The strategic planning and all of it is something that it's fluid. Any of our leadership would tell you it's very fluid, and it's changing rapidly and constantly. And there's so many moving parts that it's almost impossible. And you raised a point that kind of raised a little bit of a red flag for me. The traditional ground equipment has always been gas-powered equipment, belt loaders, tugs, bag carts, all that kind of stuff. And with technology, what we've now started to get towards is battery-operated equipment. Battery-operated equipment doesn't do so well in cold temperatures. Anyone that's lived in a cold climate knows that batteries have a tendency to be very much affected by cold temperatures. So that too is an added factor in the slowing down of the process.
Although battery technology has come quite a long way in the last 15, 20 years, it's still affected by temperature. Cold is, obviously for in the big scheme of things, when electronics run, you want to keep them cool. You never want them to overheat. But for batteries, you got to keep them there's a happy temperature between not going to work so good and it's overheating. So you got to keep it cool.
Yeah, very true. So these operations with airlines are very complicated. Occasionally, they affect general aviation as well. Roger, you sent me a text message that raised an eyebrow when you said, "What is up with your company? Legacy Airlines, man." And we talked about it on the last show, deadheading, having to get pilots from point A to point B without an airplane per se that they're operating. And you got caught up in a little bit in this weather as well. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened?
Sure. I will now be representing the airline customers for this portion of the programming.
That's funny.
So I had to reposition myself because I had an airplane that was actually out in the Caribbean, and I had been doing other, I'd flown it out a couple weeks ago, and it was there for about a week, and then I had to get back in order to fly the flight back. And as part of that kind of, deadheading's normally referred to as crew members moving, and I'm just a GA pilot. I'm not an actual crew member, so I'm an airline customer. Mm-hmm. In this particular instance. And obviously having worked at the airlines and having kind of a little bit of an insider knowledge and everything that Rob was just talking about, I do understand to a sizable degree. It's a massive operation and there are no right answers. However, in this particular case, it is extremely frustrating from a customer standpoint, because what happened to me is I actually started in Reno and had a connecting flight through Dallas. And unfortunately, my connecting flight through Dallas was at the same time as the snowpocalypse, or, the polar vortex, or whatever it is that you want to call it, which was terrible on multiple fronts. However, I was at the gate in Reno at 5:30 in the morning, and I was flying with one of our contractor pilots, and I told him, and I was like, if they're going to cancel the flight out of Dallas or out of DFW, I want them to do it now, because the problem from kind of the middling range where I understand how badly that weather is going to affect stuff. It's like, I don't want to end up in Dallas.
Mm.
Well, sure enough, to make a long story short, we flew to Dallas, and then the flight canceled approximately it canceled after our original departure time. And I'm not really, like, from a customer standpoint or even from an airline standpoint, it's frustrating to be flown into a hub. And this was not an airline thing. I mean, sometimes thunderstorms, they affect the aviation community much more than really, anything else. But in this particular case, you get to DFW, and this was almost a statewide infrastructure collapse, because it's because the state, the cities, they're not prepared for it.
Right.
But then we're flying into DFW, where there are no people, the employees for restaurants, janitors, airline personnel cannot get into work. And yet you're flying in plane loads of people on these flights that don't cancel in order to literally then strand them in an airport with no hotel rooms because they're all booked up, with no flights that are operating because every other one of them is canceling. And it's a ripple effect. Like in my case, I got extremely lucky through an extremely friendly gate agent who was even kind enough to talk to us and not send us to the customer service line that was 300 people deep and one person working the desk.
Yeah.
And actually, in the end, we bypassed the standby list somehow and got confirmed seats through the goodness and graciousness of this gate agent.
Oh, that's cool.
But you now have thousands of people stranded in an airport with nothing, with not much food because everyone's running out, nobody to help, no one to fix the food. And it is very frustrating to not, to be flying people into a problem. We want to try and keep people away from the problems. And yet sometimes airlines have a tendency, and this isn't specific to any one airline either. We have a tendency to fly people into a problem and create a problem where there was not one before for the customers.
Right.
And that's an unfortunate thing. And especially in my case, because I had to get out to operate this flight, and I was confirmed on a flight the next day. And then those flights are canceling.
Yeah.
So you're only operating half of your flights. And, the capacity of an Airbus 321 is what, 180 to 200 people?
Yeah. Like 170 to 180.
Okay. And so you've got 175 people every single time that are now stuck in DFW with no infrastructure. And that was definitely the frustrating part.
Yeah.
For me, having seen that, frustrating to not, to be flying people into a problem. We want to try and keep people away from the problems. And yet sometimes airlines have a tendency, and this isn't specific to any one airline either. We have a tendency to fly people into a problem and create a problem where there was not one before for the customers.
Right.
And that's an unfortunate thing. And especially in my case, because I had to get out to operate this flight, and I was confirmed on a flight the next day. And then those flights are canceling.
Yeah.
So you're only operating half of your flights. And, the capacity of an Airbus 321 is what, 180 to 200 people?
Yeah, like 170 to 180.
Okay, and so you've got 175 people every single time that are now stuck in DFW with no infrastructure. And that was definitely the frustrating part.
Yeah.
For me, having seen that and experiencing it, unfortunately, I got extremely lucky. There's no other way to put
did.
it.
And
it was a miracle.
Kudos to that gate agent. If it wasn't for that gate agent, so my hat's off to them.
Absolutely. And I'm very
taking
gracious.
care of the customer. I like that.
Although the way that came about was actually pretty funny as well. If you wanted to hear that, we kind of might have offended him by telling him, get us out of DFW because we're going to fly to Florida and we're going to drive and take Southwest. And that was the switch. And all of a sudden, oh, no, my friend, you do not want to fly Southwest. Give me your driver's license. That was actually the change. Is when we actually were going to fly another airline.
Yeah.
Like, just get me somewhere where I'm not stuck here. And because I had to get somewhere to then operate a flight.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, when we were threatening to fly another airline is when this gate agent decided maybe we were worthy.
Wow.
That's funny.
You know, the fact that you got out of there and you weren't stuck in the snow apocalypse for a few days, I'm very grateful that you got to get out of that potentially disastrous situation for you and the operation that you work for as well. So let's move forward on some things that have happened in the past week with aircraft engines and engine failures. Now, what we're talking about is what's been littered all over the news, all over the media about this United 777 that had an uncontained engine failure over Denver. The NTSB came out with a report this morning, and let's just dive into that a little bit. Oh, here's an article from aerotime.aero from the 23rd of February from Clement Chaper-Trudeau. Apologize if I'm butchering that, but a United 777 incident may be related to metalware, the NTSB says. On February 20th, 2021, a United Airlines Boeing 777-200 operating as Flight 328 from Denver to Honolulu suffered an engine failure, shattering engine parts over several neighborhoods around Denver. Upon preliminary examination, the NTSB found that 2 fan blades were fractured in the right-hand Pratt & Whitney PW4077 engine. One fan blade was fractured near the root, while the adjacent fan blade was fractured about mid-span. Regarding the fan blade that was fractured at the root, a preliminary on-scene exam indicates damage consistent with metal fatigue, the NTSB chairman Robert Sumwalt said. For the fan blade that was fractured mid-span, the damage is consistent with being struck when the outer fan blade banged into it. Parts of the wing to body fairing were damaged by the debris, but no structural damage was found. So far, the NTSB is unable to determine if the incident on February 20th, 2021 is similar to the one that involved another United Boeing 777 on February 13th of 2018. Back then, the NTSB concluded that the fracture of the hollow core PW4000 fan blades was due to the absence of a thermal acoustic imaging process defined by Pratt & Whitney, resulting in the lack of training for inspectors. Sumwalt concluded that the incident of Flight 328 was not classified as an uncontrolled engine failure since the containment ring worked properly and the cabin did not suffer any structural damage. So, containment ring, jet engines, fan blades, metal fatigue. The way all jet engines operate is they have the fan blade in front, or at least the more modern jet engines have a high bypass fan blade in front. Those are the ones you see from the ground, as the one you see behind me, and if you're watching the video. Now these fan blades,
the very basic way to explain it is suck, squeeze, bang, blow.
Yeah, the fan blade, the N1 fan blade, which is the forward.
That's right.
Most forward blade is the big one. That's the one that gets like about 80% of the thrust, the ones you see.
Yep.
But then there are compressor blades that get tighter and tighter, smaller and smaller, and compress that air to a very high PSI. Yep. Okay, that's the squeeze, right? So sucks in, squeezes that air. There are igniters in there, and there are burn chambers or fuel canisters that have
the fuel's introduced.
The fuel and air mixture, the compression, that compresses it into the combustion chamber, and then from there it expands. The heat expands rapidly to the point where it needs to go somewhere, where there's compression in the front. So it's not going to go that way, right? So it's going to go out the back, and that's the blow. So it blows out of the back of the engine, creating more thrust. But
well, it also turns the N2 spool, which is connected to the fan blade in the front.
Yes. So I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible, but really suck, squeeze, bang, blow. The reason you can't just jumpstart a jet engine is because it needs to be turning to create compression in order for the combustion to work properly and go out the back to turn the axle that goes the drive shaft down the middle to turn that front fan, which is the N1, which generates the most of the forward momentum, right? The most of the thrust. So those fan blades are on tremendous amount of pressure. They're made out of very high-tech materials, metals, composite materials combined with metals, and they need to be inspected regularly. What happens over time is there are metal fatigue situations that could happen. Who knows? There could have been a bird strike at a time when the engine had a lot of hours on it that created a hairline crack or micro crack or some fatigue to that metal that went unnoticed through an inspection, went unnoticed somehow, or got to the point where it just said, that's it, I'm done. I'm leaving this aircraft because of the turning momentum. Yeah. It's going to be shot out of the engine, right? There is this composite material, this carbon fiber, usually shroud that goes around that section of the engine cowling that is supposed to prevent any fan blades that have been ejected from leaving out the side that could potentially go into the cabin of the aircraft or leave the engine, in the air and then fall to the ground. That failed on this 777. And the damage was so catastrophic that the engine nacelle, the cowling around it, and the leading edge all came off and ended up in the neighborhood below.
In flight,
Yep, in flight. So this is a big deal. The reason, and we're not here to speculate what happened or what the crew did. I think they did a phenomenal job. I got to hear some of the audio from live ATC. They remained calm. They did a great job. They got the airplane on the ground. I even heard the clapping that the passengers in the cabin were doing at the landing. They're just happy to be alive. But I think they did a phenomenal job. We're not here to quarterback in any way, shape, or form, but we wanted to talk about pre-flights. Now, do you even think that something like metal fatigue can even be seen by the naked eye?
Very, very rare. I was a crew chief in the Air Force for 12 years, done hundreds and hundreds of thousands of inspections on airplanes and engines. And fatigue is very hard to see with the naked eye. What you can see is damage. You can see what we call FOD damage. FOD is an acronym for foreign object damage. So in other words, like a stone is on the ramp and it gets sucked up in the intake, and that fan blade spinning at a couple thousand RPMs hits that stone, it's going to put a little nick in the fan blade. And so you can see that damage. That's damage that you need to report, obviously, and that's the stuff you're normally looking for. Metal fatigue is very tough to see, especially on an engine, because you only see maybe 1% to 2% of that total engine in the form of a fan blade. That's all you see, and you're only seeing the front half of it. So to see anything else is you just can't see it from the walk around. And from my experience in the military, we used to have metal specialists come out, and they would actually X-ray the airplane to look for fatigue cracks, because there were known areas in the F-16s and the F-111s where there's a lot of stress put on the airframe, and those areas were known to develop fatigue cracks, which are not visible to the naked eye. So they take basically what's equivalent to like a sonogram that you would use to find babies on a pregnant mother. We would use a very similar technology on the airplane's metal, and they would run this sensor over the metal, and at the same time they're looking at a monitor that would give them a kind of like it looked like a wavelength, so to speak. So from what I remember, normally on a normal piece of metal with no fatigue, that frequency wavelength would be very steady. and it'd be just, like almost like a line. And as soon as you ran over a crack, it would change the frequency of that of that sonogram, and it would indicate that there's something there.
Ah.
And when I when I saw them do that and saw the line blinking, I'm like, oh wow, look, so it doesn't. You can't even see that there's a crack there. And he's like, yep, there's one right here, and so that's how they found it. But that took very sophisticated equipment to find that kind of stuff, and that's something they do at major overhauls and rebuild processes or whenever the need arises. But if I could, real quick, Tony and Roger, this engine event has happened in the past, fatigue, and you also mentioned fatigue, but also it could also develop in the manufacturing process, as we learned in the 1989 United Airlines, and it's coincidence the same airline, but it's not the same thing. But United Airlines Flight 232, which crashed in Sioux City, Iowa, and the very famous Captain Al Haines.
Yes.
And the first officer was let's see, Bill Records, and the check airman or the sim instructor Dudley, he's a flight engineer, Dudley Dvorak, were flying the airplane where they had that the third engine, the one on the tail of the DC-10, had the similar thing where the blade separated from the engine, and it pierced all three hydraulic lines of the DC-10. Now, in this case, they had three engines. And the reason why they had a problem was the three hydraulic lines all intersected at one common point in the airplane, which was the only place that they intersected. And it just happened to be in line with where this fan blade cut through. So it was basically a 1 in a million chance that it happened, that it would happen. So basically they lost all their hydraulic pressure, which controls all the powers all the hydraulic flight controls. And basically they had no flight controls, and they had to land this airplane using engine thrust and airspeed. Yeah. So there's an example of, fatigue or something happening in the actual production part of the engine that went unnoticed. You just can't see it. It's just something that, hopefully they get it right when they make it. And hope, like you said, will be interesting to see what really happened to this one, because it's big news.
Yeah. And, thank God that nobody was injured, both in the aircraft and on the ground.
Right.
I mean, can you imagine you're in your front yard?
Thing? Engine intake?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That intake is
it's huge.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's probably, they're what, 12, 15 feet round?
Yeah. That intake is huge. You can stand in the engine nacelle. I mean, that's a big engine. And to have that thing land in your yard.
I do know it's the circumference of a 737 fuselage. That's the circumference of a 777
really?
engine. So that's how big it is. Yeah. It's they compared it. Yeah. It's crazy.
And the three guys that are standing in their yard, and it says gate agent, FAA, or gate agent, captain, and first officer, and they're looking at the engine nacelle in the yard, and then it says the gate agent going, "Is this airplane still going out on time?"
Yeah.
I love it.
That's funny. I can imagine crew tracking going, "Hey guys, I'm glad you're on the ground safely. If you want to just go ahead to gate 11, we'll have another airplane waiting for you."
I've had that happen to me actually in LA years ago.
Yeah, I know, me too.
I was like, "We just declared an emergency. Did an emergency landing." It's like, "Yeah, we got another airplane for you. No worries. Just they're already boarded up. We got a new flight attendant crew. Just show up to the gate when you're ready." What? But anyway, not every diversion is due to an engine issue that is catastrophic. And right now, the media is just like chomping at the bit, hungry to, there's another one. And just this morning, I saw that Delta had an emergency landing after a 757 after suffering an engine problem. This also from Aero Time Arrow. I'll put a link in the show notes. This one came out also on the 23rd. Delta Airlines Boeing 757 operating flight 2123 from Atlanta to Seattle suffered engine trouble and was forced to make an emergency landing in Salt Lake City. According to FlightRadar24.com data, the Delta Airlines Boeing 757 registered as November 819 Delta X-ray departed from Atlanta's International Airport towards its intended destination of Seattle International Airport on February 22nd, 2021. However, a few hours after departure, a flight deck indicator light warned the crew of possible engine trouble. The crew decided to divert and made an emergency landing in Salt Lake City at around 11:08 p.m. UTC. Mm-hmm. Speaking to the media, a Delta Airlines spokesperson said that the aircraft diverted out of an abundance of caution. So, this indicator warning was a indication of a possible problem with one of its engines, but they landed, they taxied to the gate. It was really a non-event. There was a problem, there was an indication, they landed. But of course, every little thing that's going to happen now for the next few weeks is going to come up.
Yeah, well, we talked about it in an earlier podcast too, and it revolved around the return of service for the MAX, the 737 MAX. Shortly after the aircraft had been given its seal of approval, approved to fly, Air Canada had one of their Boeing 737 MAX declare an emergency and land back in Tucson when it came out of storage because they had an engine. They called it an engine problem, but really it was a hydraulic problem. But the hydraulic pump is connected to the engine, so that's why they declared it. They categorized it as an engine problem. But hey, they just out of abundance of precaution declared an emergency and landed the airplane in Tucson, and everybody's safe and sound. I mean, there's no passengers on that airplane anyway, but I
remember that ferry flight. They pull it out of storage, hadn't flown for a while, and
that's right.
And it's mechanical. It's not like your car where it starts to run rough. You can pull into the next service station and say, "Hey, can you check out my car?" You're in the air, so you gotta figure out a place to land it.
It's your gas cap. You got to take it off and put it back on, and the light will go away in about 10 miles.
I can't tell you how many times I've seen that too driving down the road. Your gas cap is up.
Or might. Here in Texas, you get a lot. The you get cars with the tire pressure monitoring systems, and those are filled with nitrogen, so that numerous reasons, lighter, but also for corrosion. Because it's not oxygen, any moisture in there won't corrode. But people don't care; they'll just put normal air in the tire, which is no big deal. But normal oxygen compared to nitrogen, it expands and contracts at a more greater rate than nitrogen does. So here in Texas, the temperature swings up and down. Like, for instance, the last time we had a snowpocalypse, and every single tire pressure monitoring system in every car that we own was saying, "Hey, your tire pressure is low. Your tire pressure." No, it's not Tom Brady.
It's not Deflategate.
The footballs, but the actual tire pressures were low. But I guess it has something very similar to what Tom Brady experienced up there. But anyway, the temperature went down, and so you have to go put air in your tires and fill them up. And a lot of people don't realize that. Oh my God! They think, I got a nail in my tire or whatever. There's a line at the Goodyear.
And ladies and gentlemen, we're back from the break. Well, Rob, I got to say thank you so much for the information that you've been giving us with, how they do the sonic x-rays of engine parts and fan blades. And I mean, I knew that they did x-rays, but I really didn't understand the process. And thank you for going through that. That's great. There's a lot of challenges facing commercial pilots nowadays. It's really in the mission statement of this podcast, is that we're here to explore the journey of today's aviators and the challenges in the industry and in today's marketplace. There's a lot of challenges that face us now, especially with everything that's going on in the world. And I did mention earlier that I did fly a 2-day, technically a 3-day trip, but it was a red eye that left Los Angeles. I think it was a 12:05 a.m. departure, and we're flying to Charlotte with one of those 10-hour layovers in Charlotte. So you land at early in the morning, and when you're at a hotel or an airport that the hotel is co-located and you just have to walk across, it's really not that big of a deal because you can go from the gate to your hotel room really quick. But when you're at a place where the hotel is off property, now you have to, you're already tired from the red eye, but then you have to take the time to go down to the curb, get in a hotel van. You might have to wait for the van, and then your time at rest is shortened by that period. So the trip was supposed to be a 12:05 departure out of Los Angeles and landing in Charlotte like at 7:30 in the morning. Well, we did all the necessary pre-flight duties, and all the checklists were run. We're ready to go. The captain had to make this new PA that we have to make now, since the TSA has started this new violation in case you're not wearing a mask. Now, not just the FAA, but the TSA is now getting involved. So we have mandatory PAs that we have to make. Well, that was all done, and we thought, well, let's do this. I was well rested. My captain was well rested. I'd flown with him before, so we knew each other. We push off the gate, and it was a relatively uneventful, quiet evening in Los Angeles. No fog, no marine layer. It was going to be a good trip. And we're 30 seconds from taking the runway. We're taxiing. The before takeoff checklist was complete, and we get the infamous ding, and the flight attendant says, yeah, we need to return to the gate. We have a passenger that will be leaving us. Okay, do you require any threats or anything like that we need to know about? And they're like, you need to have the police standing by. This individual is saying that we're not living in a communist country, that you can't make me wear my mask and all this stuff. And the passengers that are sitting around them are very upset. And if this goes on, there's going to be a fight. Holy crap. So it got very busy very quickly. And I've got to say, without sounding like I'm tooting my own horn, because the captain was very much responsible for the tone in the cockpit, but man, did we do a good job. It got very busy. He's like, okay, do you mind letting ground know? We're gonna, yeah, sure, no problem. And so he was concentrating on slowing the aircraft to a stop. I told ground, listen, we've got a passenger disturbance on the aircraft. We're gonna need to return to the gate, and I need to coordinate that. So if we can get clearance back to the gate. And they're like, okay, you're requiring any assistance? And I'm like, well, at this time, no, but we're going to coordinate with our operations. We may request law enforcement. So they're like, all right, turn left on this, taxiway, taxi back via Charlie. I'm like, okay. So I tell the captain, all right, your aircraft, your radios, I'm going to contact operations to get us the gate. He's like, okay, great. So now he makes the turn, and I called operations. Of course, there's no ramp control that late in the morning. And so I had to call ops, tell them we're coming back, passenger disturbance. We needed a supervisor, the CSR or ground security coordinator, whatever they call it, to meet us at the gate. And the flight attendants are requesting that we have law enforcement. Would you like me to coordinate that with the tower, or do you want to handle it? And they're like, no, we'll take care of it. We'll have everybody standing by. You're going to come back to this gate. Okay, no problem. So I come back into the cockpit, tell the captain which gate we're going to. He goes, okay. I said, I'll get ground. So I call ground, tell him about the gate. And now he's making a PA saying, ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We're going to be going back to the gate. We'll have more information in a moment. And so we get the whole thing going. It was almost, the aircraft really never stopped. It was a seamless operation. We get back to the gate. Turned out 2 early 20-year-old individuals, males, refused to wear the mask once they boarded the aircraft. And it was not the flight attendants that were initiating the response of, hey, you need to put your mask on. It was the passengers around them that were insisting, hey, put on your mask. And so the passengers were the ones that were really policing themselves. And the flight attendants, obviously got up to find out what's all this commotion and said, sir, you really got to put the mask. Well, I'm not living in a communist country. You can't make me do anything. And I'm like, well, okay, sure. Well, I guess the PAs and the information that they're bombarded with 17 times at least by the time they check in to the airport to the time they're sitting in their seat with their seatbelt on. Every single one of those PAs meant nothing to them. So they were escorted off the plane. There was not any kind of hubbub or commotion. They were very calm.
Good.
And we were very grateful. We upped the fuel. We got back up to release fuel, just so we had, every possible bit of fuel that we needed. The whole process didn't take more than about 25 minutes. Once the fuel was on the aircraft, we, of course, the captain made some PAs apologizing. And the funny part is, and I always get a kick out of this, is, so you get back to the gate, the jet bridge is attached, they open the door, and we're running our shutdown checklist. And all of a sudden, from the back, we hear, they're like, oh, they're so happy that we returned to the gate and delayed the flight. It's like, oh, they're happy that those guys are gone,
Getting off
and
the
so
airplane.
Our purser, our number one lead flight attendant, came in after we got to the gate and told us kind of what happened. And okay, no big deal, right? So we were in the air about, I think it was an hour delayed from our original departure time. Of course, you're not going to make up an hour going to Charlotte, but we were only 28 minutes late. So we had good tailwinds, good strong jet stream.
Yeah.
What I found amazing was that once we were at cruise, the captain and our purser, our lead flight attendant, coordinated the information, because now it's required that we fill out a report. We fill out a report because we had a passenger disturbance, we had a non-compliant passenger, and we had to return to the gate. So the cool thing about these reports is, while you're in cruise, you can actually access, at least at our company, at Legacy Airlines, you can access what they call a SIRS report. And all you'd have to do is click the buttons. You don't have to sit there and type a huge narrative. It's all laid out. You put in, it knows your schedule. You just click on the flight number, and it generates all the pertinent information, the time, and then where did the incident happen? It happened on taxi out. And then it generates it. What kind of incident was it? Passenger disturbance. You click on that. And then it goes, oh, which passenger? And there's the whole passenger list of everybody on board, the seat number and their name. I was like, are you kidding me? And so he's just like, oh my God, I've never had to do this. This is amazing. So here he is clicking on it, and it goes, were any other passengers involved? Yes. Okay, what seat were they in? Was this their name? Yes, it was. I mean, it is so intuitive.
Wow.
Amazing. And so it took him about 10 minutes to fill out this report with a small narrative, whereas in the past, you'd have to generate all this. You'd have to write a narrative out. Then when you landed, you had to go log on online, and you had to type all this stuff into the computer. And if you didn't do it in a certain period of time, it would wipe it out, and you'd have to start all over again. It was frustrating. But man, these new reports,
that's
pretty cool.
Yeah, nice try. Sound like you did a good job out there too, man. It gets really busy, just on a normal day, and then to have to stop what you're doing, turn around, and divert your attention to getting the airplane back. That's you did a good job.
Thank you.
That's a lot going on, especially having to deal with a passenger disturbance. You never know where that can go these days. It can go bad and end up on CNN or whatever. But it sounded like your crew in the back handled it well, and thank God the passengers said something. Yeah. It's good to see that the passengers are all in too.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, he did. And thank you for saying that. He did say afterwards, he was like, you know what? I'm really glad you were here with me. And I was like, really? He was like, yeah, because if you were a new hire that, came in from a different aspect of aviation and hadn't spent all that time with our regional partner over there at Sandpiper, I mean, you would have been all like, oh, what do we do? What am I supposed to do? Okay,
Good
and you're just
start.
along for the ride, but you were like actually taking care of. I didn't have to tell you to do anything. You knew exactly what to do. He goes, man, you Sandpiper guys are awesome. And I was like, yeah. As Roger shakes his head, oh my God, your head's getting bigger. I was worried about it. Oh, yeah.
Good job.
So, have you
Tony.
had any passenger incidences relating to not wearing a mask yet, Rod?
No, sir. Nothing that I know of. If it was low level and handled, between the passenger and the gate agent, or the passenger and the flight attendants. But no, I've had pretty good flights all month, and since this, I guess, this started this month as far as the regulation. So yeah, nope, not bad. I mean, we've only had a couple flights that were completely full, even a jump seater, but most of the flights are less than 100 people, or 110, 120 or less. Probably the least amount of people I had on a flight this last month was maybe 50 or 60. So that's pretty light load, but and pretty much everything has been, I guess I've been all over the place, but I'm just trying to determine if it's, specific to any one area of the country, or going to a specific area, but it doesn't. Everything's been good.
Good. Well, real quick, I wanted to mention in a segment we normally call
WTF.
Like on that trip, we landed in Salt Lake City, in the new terminal in Salt Lake City, and we parked at the gate, and we landed it. It was the evening time, and we had to walk from the gate that Legacy Airlines uses now in Salt Lake City to the curb in order to get the hotel van to go to the overnight. 1.25 miles. No automated transportation and whatsoever. Walking. You have to walk. And to add insult to injury, we had one passenger that required an escort, wheelchair escort. Salt Lake City doesn't offer wheelchair escorts right now, or they didn't at that time. I don't know if they have like limited hours or what they're doing. So the poor lady and the gate agent had to sit there and try to figure out how they were going to get her 1.25 miles to the baggage claim area of walking. Oh my goodness. That's ridiculous. And yes, the city has plans in the future to have like some kind of railway system. But yeah, if you're going through Salt Lake City and you're going to be flying out, wear your running shoes or walking shoes, because you're going to be huffing it, bring a bottle of...
I feel like it's a Delta thing. What is it with Delta's hubs?
I don't know, man.
Yeah.
You've been to Detroit?
Walk everywhere. Yeah, Detroit. Yeah, that's...
Atlanta?
Yeah, Atlanta.
Yeah. Atlanta's got the tram.
Yeah, they got the tram.
Yeah,
but Detroit, Atlanta, Salt Lake, because we go to Salt Lake fairly regularly. What is it with Delta's hubs?
You get the moving walkways between the things.
Even Denver for United, even Denver. I mean, it's like you're walking forever. Really?
Ever. Yeah. Yeah, that's
and I don't
crazy.
use those moving walkways.
I was going to say,
I try not to, because the minute you get on them, you're going to have like a group of people that just
stop and sightsee and watch, and like, oh, this is so my WTF moment would have to be in Detroit. Also, we just happened to talk about that, where the terminal that Legacy Airlines parks at is all the way in the north terminal. It's the D terminal. We usually get the gates all the way at the end, and then they're cheaper, right? And then the hotel, if you have a short layover, is the Westin Airport Marriott, which is located in the terminal, in the Delta's terminal, all the way on the south end. So it would normally take, if you were driving a car, 2 minutes, 3 minutes to get there. It takes a good half hour to almost 45 minutes for them to pick you up, go through all the airport turns and stops to get you to the airport hotel, just on the other side of the airport. And I'm like, this is a short overnight. You should be able to get to your hotel within like 10 minutes, 15 minutes the max. Here it's taking you a half hour to 45 minutes.
Debrief it.
Anyways, I always do. But then, so here, why do we choose these short overnights too, or these short hotels? Because, we're there minimal time, and, pretty much you're going to go back to the terminal the next morning and go to work. Well, this is when we had the second round of cancellations in Dallas. So I was stuck in that short layover hotel for 2 nights, limited food, limited options. I guess now they opened up the known crew member. Well, it's been open, but normally we don't. You have to use it, but anyways, you got to go through known crew member, and you can go in civil uniform, but you have to go into the terminal and get food to come back to the hotel. So that's the other WTF moment, but good. I'll live. First world problems, legacy airline problems.
That's right.
We're good.
That's right. Speaking of, Roger, you've had an interesting couple of weeks of flying, and you were telling me a little bit about an incident you had. Well, not an incident, but just a flight you had where you were conducting a straight in versus a circling approach. What exactly was happening there?
I don't understand. Like, at some point, when does landing straight in, are you better off landing straight into something than doing a circling approach? I was flying into Truckee, and the approach that gets you to the lowest minimums is actually to a shorter runway. It 4,600 feet, I believe, is what it is for runway 20, except that approach also has the lowest minimums. And when plugging the numbers in, just to kind of give an idea where this probably came from, is when I plug the numbers in, the default is part 135 and part 121 numbers, where you guys need to have 1.67 times your landing distance in order to make a legal landing. And so I got a little yellow message that basically told me, hey, there's an error. And what the error was is I did not technically have 1.67. Now, we operate under part 91, so we do not need we don't need that. And my actual landing distance was way short than 4,600. And I basically briefed the passengers, because the weather was bad. It's like, look, I'm not gonna use the longer runway. I'm gonna go land straight in on the shorter runway. You're gonna know we're there. I'm not gonna screw around. We're just gonna put the plane down. I had landed on that runway before, but not in this particular model. I put it down. It was a positive landing. It stopped way before the end of the runway we got off. But the guy behind me, and this happened on 2 days, actually. One day, and then 2 days later, it happened again, where they shot the same approach and they started a circle. I presume maybe because of landing calculations. I'm not sure. And they end up going missed. And it just begs the question to me, why, at what point does doing a circling approach actually safer than landing straight in? I don't know how, what your guys have specifically my Embraer 145 type rating. I have a limitation for circling in VMC only, because we didn't do that as part of the check ride. Obviously somebody somewhere knows that circling, is a little bit of a more risky maneuver. And yet we've still got these guys that are going out there unable to land, circling in a mountain airport, doing circling approaches in bad weather when there's a perfectly good runway right in front of them. And it's just kind of one of those things that made me wonder. I'd never really thought about it before, but literally on 2 different days, 2 different occasions, it was the same thing. I landed, and the guy behind me are circling, and they're going missed. They're trying to circle in a mountainous airport, doing a missed approach in a mountainous airport, and I landed straight in.
And were they also GA Part 91 guys?
Yeah, it's all GA, because there is no. There was one that went missed before me. That was a fractional operator. Quite frankly, I don't know what his deal was. He was just chicken. I honestly don't know. I won't use any names. And then on the second day, I know that it was a Challenger that was coming in behind me. And I don't remember what the one on the first day was. Just like, just go straight in.
Yeah. Yeah, I too have been in a situation actually at Sandpiper at the regional airline where we're going into an outstation. It's a small airport with a control tower. The winds were for the preferred runway not favorable. It turned out to be a tailwind, and it was pretty gusty, strong winds, snow on the ground, but dry runway. And they asked us, what approach do you want? And we said, well, let's get the approach to whatever runway it was, circle the land of this runway, which was the longer runway, the preferred runway anyway. But for whatever reason, their instrument approach procedure was out of service. So our only option was to circle the land. And so the captain briefed it. The captain was flying it. Strong winds, more than 35 knots, only a few hundred feet off the ground. And so he briefed it. He goes, yeah, I've got a strong wind. So on the circled approach, you're going to have the best view from your side of the cockpit. Can you please just, make sure you can see it? And we're going to stay clear clouds. If any question, this is what we're going to do if we go missed. And we're like, yeah, great. Sure. Sure enough, when he broke out, visual, all right, going visual, circling. And Tyler's like, okay. And then he's not really putting in enough wind correction. I'm like, you're drifting left. You need to go further right, You need to go further right. I think you need to go missed. And he looks up and he's like, got a control tower in front of him. I'm like, no, I've been blown way off. So of course he went missed. And the second go around that we came out and tried, he landed just fine with the circling approach. But circling approaches can be very tricky. And it doesn't matter if you're a Skyhawk pilot or you're an Embraer pilot or you're a Boeing pilot. I mean, circling approaches can be very tricky because it's a visual maneuver and we don't do them every day. So when you brought that up, I really thought it'd be a great topic to discuss here on the show. Rob, have you had any similar situations with circling approaches?
I've never, probably the last time I did one was with Sandpiper landing in Dallas when we did when the winds get strong out of the northwest, they tend to like to land on the 3-1s, which are, diagonals. And they used to have us do a localizer approach. I think it's the 3-5 center, circle the land, 3-1 left when the winds are really strong out of the northwest. And that was probably the last time I've had to do something like that. I mean, they I guess sidestepping is that considered a circle to land? Not really, but it's not the same thing. But yeah, that was the last time, and the only reason why we were doing it wasn't for visibility. It was just because of the winds. And the winds are just so strong that it exceeded the crosswind limitations on the northwest parallel runways that we had to use the diagonals. So. And then when we took off that day, I mean, it was really fun to be a plane spotter, watching those airplanes land. As we're holding short of the runway, we're getting ready to take off, but you're watching airplanes land on that runway. Man, the wind shear and the you watch these 7.5 777s coming in, and they're just all over the place trying to get the airplane down on the ground. Those guys had a handful of airplane coming in to land that day.
Yeah, well, I did a little research on the Circle the Land. I found a pretty interesting guide to, circling approaches. It's on thinkaviation.net. It came out and was published in 2017 by Sarah Fritz. It's called A Practical Guide to Circling Approaches. And just briefly, it says here that pilots fly circling approaches when it's not possible to do a straight-in approach to a runway after an instrument approach. Circling approaches are necessary for a variety of reasons. The most common are strong tailwinds, obstacles, high descent angles, or the final approach segment exceeds 30 degrees from the approach runway. So that's the book answer, and you're here for the practical answer. And she goes on to say, if you're on an ILS approach to runway 2, but the winds are out of the south at 15 knots, only a fool would land with a 15-knot tailwind. So instead of landing on runway 2, you enter an extended left downwind to land on runway 18. That is a circling approach. You are simply aligning the aircraft with the best runway after you break out of the clouds on a normal instrument approach. And there's a couple diagrams here in the article that can be very helpful. There are hundreds of reasons and ways you can do a circling approach. Each scenario is different, but the fundamentals are all the same. You need to get aligned with the best runway after you exit the clouds. And she goes on to explain the different minimum, the circling minimum. That's also something you need to be well aware of. They use Boise Air Terminal or Goen Field, BOI, as an example.
Is that the distance from the field, like the 1.3, 1.5, 1.7?
Yeah, they're talking about that. And
2.3 and 4.5.
Visibility minimums are higher than the LNAV minimums. Because, again, you have to maintain particular visibility that is sometimes not standard VFR, a little bit above it, actually. Circling only approaches do not allow a straight in approach, so you will only see circling minimum. So if you're looking at a chart and it's a circling approach, you're just going to see the circling minimum. Sometimes, though, there aren't any other options. So take a look at the Instrument Procedures Handbook, and it explains the reasons for building a circle to land approach or using one. So you were talking about distances. The final approach course alignment with the runway, if it exceeds 30 degrees, it's a circle approach, not a sidestep or whatnot.
That's right.
The descent angle, if it's greater than 400 feet per nautical mile from the final approach fix to the threshold crossing height, when the maximum gradient is exceeded, a circle-only approach procedure may be designed to meet the gradient criteria. So in a mountainous area, like what Roger was going into, sometimes people elect to use a circle approach simply because if they were doing a straight in, they wouldn't be able to do that. So there's plenty, like mentioned here in the article, plenty of reasons why to do a circling approach, and some general rules and safety as well. So I encourage you to take a look at the link in the show notes. Some of them are prohibited at night, so be very careful. Always read the notes section of your instrument approach plate. Never do a circling approach to an airport that is unfamiliar to you at night, even if it's authorized. That's a given. Just because it's legal doesn't mean it's safe. And if you do single pilot, always try to do left-hand traffic patterns unless otherwise indicated, so that you can always keep the airport in sight. In this segment, I got some feedback this week. I was very excited to. This feedback is from Z-Man. He emailed us and he writes, "Hey, gents, great show. I was referred to your show by some of our legacy cohorts. Big fans and suggested a listen. Thank you for promoting a positive viewpoint and perspective during these turbulent times. Well done." He also goes on to write that he is a 787 first officer in Chicago for Legacy Airlines. He's a former Sandpiper 145 driver, not a flow-through, former chief pilot at a Scenic Air Cargo company, and retired from the U.S. Army Air Submission Manipulator, where he was an instructor and standards pilot. I also produce, he says, and administer the world's largest 787 training study resource for legacy pilots. So if you're a 787 pilot, cool, or you're thinking about going to the 787 for Legacy Airlines, he puts on a website that is a great resource for studying that equipment. Anyone interested can send us an email directly. I'll be more than happy to send you the website. It's password protected because it's specifically for legacy pilots on the 787. So, but I'll be more than happy to pass that along. And he says, cheers, keep up the good work. So Z-Man, thank you so much for that feedback. We'd love to hear more from our listeners. Feel free to send us an email or a message on the socials. We love it. Keep them coming.
Thanks, Z-Man. That's cool.
Well, all of us here at Squawk Ident hope that you're enjoying our podcast. If you find value in our podcast and when you'd like to help us by contributing to the podcast and help us grow, we encourage you to visit our website at aviatortony.com. That's Alpha, Victor, the number 8, Romeo, Tango, Oscar, November, Yankee.com. From there, on the homepage, you can find methods to contribute to the show, become a producer with either a one-time or recurrent contribution. You can also leave us audio feedback, questions, send us emails, give us ideas for show topics that you'd like us to cover, all there from the website. Social media users, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, you can find us under the Squawk Ident Podcast. We encourage you to support our show on the YouTube channel with a like, subscribe, and a share. And don't forget to select the little bell to be notified of any new videos. In closing, I would like to say thank you for taking the time to listen to these grateful aviators. Keep the dirty side down out there. Be safe and take care of each other. Bye, everyone.
See ya.
Take care.